Seraphina Vance stood silently on the command bridge of the Victory, gazing out at the vastness of space. Her mind was as clouded as the void before her. The distant stars twinkled like a million eyes, observing her every move, while the stars themselves seemed too far to offer any solace. The mission she had just been briefed on weighed heavily on her shoulders. "Captain Vance, we've entered the Zlyar sector," Lieutenant Hawkins announced, snapping Seraphina from her thoughts. His voice was steady, though a hint of unease hung in the air. Seraphina turned slowly, locking eyes with the young officer. The truth of their situation was clear. No one on this ship was ready for what awaited them. Not the crew, not the galaxy, and certainly not Seraphina herself. "Patch me through to command," she replied, her voice colder than it should have been. The holographic projection flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Harper. "Captain," he said, his voice calm but laced with an undeniable urgency. "This mission is critical. The Star have been experimenting with human genetic material. We need to stop them from creating their own army of enhanced soldiers." Seraphina nodded, though she already knew the stakes. She had seen the battle data, felt the weight of the coming confrontation. But there was more, much more, hidden in the shadows of the mission. As she ran a hand through her short-cropped hair, she recalled her previous encounter with the Star, a race of alien conquerors who believed themselves superior to all others. They had come to Earth years ago, seeking to study humanity's resilience, the very thing that made Earthlings formidable. The Star underestimated humanity's strength. And now, their empire was falling apart because of that mistake. But that didn't mean Seraphina's team would get out unscathed. They were about to face a truth that no one expected. The humans they were fighting to protect were, in fact, the most deadly weapon the galaxy had ever seen. "Seraphina," the Admiral's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do whatever it takes to stop them. You know what we're up against. Failure isn't an option." The transmission cut off, leaving Seraphina with a cold, sickening realization. They weren't just facing an alien threat, they were facing the very weapon that Earth had been unwittingly crafting for centuries. Her team wasn't just fighting an external enemy, they were fighting a part of themselves. The Victory slipped into the dense asteroid field that surrounded the Zlyar sector. There was a quiet calm on the bridge, broken only by the steady hum of the ship's engines. The rest of the crew went about their duties, preparing for the coming mission, their faces drawn with the knowledge of the impending battle. Seraphina walked down the narrow hallway toward the ship's war room. As she entered, she was greeted by the quiet murmurs of her team. The Black Hammer unit had seen more than their fair share of violence. But this mission, they all knew, was different. "Captain, the data from the last recon mission is ready," Sergeant Jace Dawson said, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. He was a big guy, a veteran of countless operations, but even he seemed on edge. The kind of tension that would break any normal person, but not someone like Jace. Seraphina leaned in, scanning the screen as Jace highlighted the coordinates. "It's here, Captain," he said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and dread. "The Star are breeding enhanced soldiers on that planet." Seraphina's stomach tightened as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. She had known the Star were dangerous, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. Earth had always feared being overtaken by alien technology, yet the truth was far worse. They weren't fighting against machines or advanced technology. They were fighting against themselves. "What's the plan?" Jace asked, his voice now tinged with both fear and anger. Seraphina stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "We hit them hard. We take out the breeding facility, and we stop them before they can deploy their army. But Captain," Jace continued, his tone turning serious, "we've been through the data. These enhanced soldiers, they're not just any humans. They've been genetically modified, turned into something more, something we can't even begin to understand." Seraphina clenched her jaw. "I know. That's why we're going in with everything we've got. No mistakes." The final briefing before the mission was quick. The crew had prepared everything, and now there was no turning back. Seraphina stood in front of her team, the weight of their lives and the fate of the mission on her shoulders. "Listen up," she began, her voice cutting through the tension. The enemy knows we're coming. They won't be expecting us to go in this hard. We have one shot. We take the facility, we destroy their research, and we get out. No heroics, no second chances. Jace stepped forward. We'll make sure it gets done, Captain. The team gathered their weapons and secured their gear. The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air, and Seraphina could feel the sting of fear in the pit of her stomach. The mission wasn't just about defeating the enemy, it was about facing a truth they weren't ready for. As Seraphina boarded the dropship that would carry her team to the surface, she took a moment to glance back at the Victory, her ship. This could be the last time she saw it, or anything, again. It didn't matter. They were Earth's last line of defense, and she would see this mission through to the end. The door of the dropship closed, sealing her in with her team. Let's make sure we survive this, she said softly, to no one in particular. She knew it would take more than just firepower to win this battle. It would take the strength that humanity had always relied on, the strength to fight not just for survival, but for their very future. The dropship's engines rumbled, shaking Seraphina's bones. She clenched her jaw, her eyes fixed on the rolling expanse of the alien world beneath them. The planet's surface, covered with jagged rock formations and vast fields of cracked earth, was as hostile as the stars themselves. They were just moments away from setting foot on enemy soil, and Seraphina could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her chest. The team was silent, each lost in their thoughts, preparing for the operation ahead. The hum of the engines was the only sound filling the cramped cabin, a constant reminder of the time running out. Status report, Jace? Seraphina's voice was steady, but her eyes never left the planet below. Jace was the team's tech specialist, a quiet force whose talent with the ship's systems often saved them in the tightest spots. He had his hands on the console, the lights from his HUD flickering against his dark skin. Everything's green, Captain. We'll be on the ground in 5 minutes. I've got a lock on the facility's location. Good, she replied, her voice clipped. Her mind raced, everything depended on this one moment. Once we land, we breach the perimeter, hit the facility hard, and extract the data. No hesitation. Understood, Jace said, the determination in his voice matching hers. The rest of the team nodded in agreement, their faces hardening. Seraphina's eyes briefly flickered to Lieutenant Hawkins, the young officer who had been with her from the beginning. He had the fire of youth in his gaze, but there was something else there too, fear. Fear that, for once, Seraphina couldn't hide from. She knew what this mission could cost them. And yet, it had to be done. As the dropship descended through the thick atmosphere, the air was dense with the scent of sulfur and decay, a stark contrast to the crisp, clean air of Earth. The facility came into view, massive, industrial, and cold. Its walls were tall and reinforced with alien technology that hummed with energy. The team suited up in silence. Every movement felt deliberate, like a ritual, as they strapped on weapons and checked their gear. Each man and woman knew the stakes. They were not just fighting for Earth, they were fighting against the very thing that had been buried deep within humanity's history, the weapon they had unknowingly become. Time to move, people, Seraphina said, her voice cold but commanding. Remember, we're not here to make friends. We're here to end this. The doors of the dropship opened with a hiss, and the team poured out onto the hostile terrain, boots crunching on the rocky ground. The facility loomed ahead, a dark monolith in the distance, but the oppressive quiet of the alien landscape only heightened their senses. Seraphina led the way, moving swiftly, her boots steady as she crossed the barren land. The rest of the team followed, the sound of their footsteps barely audible over the howling wind. We're not going to have much time once we breach, she muttered under her breath. Stay sharp. They reached the perimeter wall, an impenetrable line of alien metal that stretched as far as the eye could see. The facility was well guarded, but Jace had already hacked into their security grid, neutralizing most of their defenses. Clear, Jace whispered, his fingers flying across the small device in his hand. You're good to go, Captain? Seraphina nodded and motioned for the team to follow. They advanced, weapons at the ready. The silence of the world around them felt suffocating now, the threat of the unknown pressing in from all sides. The door to the facility slid open, and they flooded into the darkened corridor. The air inside was thick with the smell of metal and something else, a chemical stench that made Seraphina's skin crawl. She signaled for a halt. The team paused, their eyes scanning the dark hallway ahead. They had to move fast, but they couldn't afford to rush. The Zdar were unpredictable. And something about this place felt wrong, like a trap waiting to be sprung. Seraphina's comms buzzed. "Captain!" Jace's voice crackled through. "You need to see this." She turned sharply. "What is it?" "There's more to this place than just the soldiers," Jace said. His voice had dropped to a low whisper. "It's something else. It's humanity." Seraphina's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" Jace hesitated. "I found a room on the lower levels. It's full of genetic data, and records on human experiments." A chill ran through Seraphina. She had always suspected something was wrong with the Zdara's interest in Earth soldiers, but this was something far worse than she could have ever imagined. "Do not engage until we know more," Seraphina ordered, her mind racing. The truth was starting to reveal itself, something far darker than a mere military conflict. "Jace, can you secure that data?" "I'm on it," Jace responded. "But you need to get down here fast." The team moved swiftly toward the lower levels, Seraphina's mind focused on one question: what had humanity become? They reached the lab, and Jace was already there, plugging into the facility's terminal. He looked up, his face grim. "Captain, this place, it's not just a breeding ground for soldiers. They've been using human DNA in their experiments. They were trying to create soldiers like us, using our own genetics." Seraphina felt a pang in her chest, the weight of that revelation sinking in. Her entire life had been a lie. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "They were trying to recreate us. But worse, they wanted to control it. They were going to weaponize humanity itself." Jace's fingers flew across the console, pulling up more files. "These aren't just soldiers they've been making. These are humans, modified, twisted versions of us. We're the weapon they feared. But now they want to replicate it." Seraphina's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about facing the truth of what humanity had become, not just a race to be conquered, but one that could destroy the galaxy if manipulated. The very thing that made them the deadliest force in the universe was the thing that made them so dangerous to themselves. "Captain, we need to shut this place down, now," Jace said urgently, his eyes never leaving the screen. Seraphina stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of it all. Then, without another word, she turned to her team. "Let's finish what we started." The fate of humanity was no longer in their hands alone. It was a legacy they had to carry, whether they wanted to or not. The facility's deep hum vibrated through the walls, echoing in Seraphina's skull. She stood in the heart of the lab, her mind reeling with the shocking truth: humanity's deadliest weapon was not forged in war, but crafted in secrecy, buried beneath layers of forgotten history. The Zdar hadn't just studied them, they had dissected them, using Earth's genetic code to create an army of soldiers meant to rival their own. "We need to destroy this place." Jace's voice broke through her thoughts, urgent, yet laced with a quiet horror. He was still standing by the terminal, his fingers dancing across the interface, extracting data that confirmed their worst fears. Seraphina clenched her fists. "I know." Her pulse quickened as her mind cycled through every possible outcome. They were not just here to prevent the Zdar from advancing their plans, they were here to erase the truth. The very idea that the Zdar had tried to duplicate their greatest strength by replicating the human spirit, the human will, was too dangerous to be allowed to spread. "Captain!" Lieutenant Hawkins called out from behind, his voice tight. "There's a problem." Seraphina turned quickly, her heart already pounding. Hawkins stood by the doorway, his face pale. "What is it?" "There's a secondary facility, underground. It's not on any of the schematics," he said. "It's hidden." Seraphina's stomach twisted. If the Zdar were hiding something, it wasn't just data they were after. They were experimenting with something else, something far more dangerous. "I'll go," she said, her voice firm. "Hawkins, you're with me. Jace, keep working on the main terminal. We need to erase everything." Jace nodded without looking up, his fingers still a blur across the holographic console. "Understood." Seraphina turned and strode toward the elevator shaft at the far end of the corridor. Hawkins was close behind, his weapon drawn. The tension between them hung thick in the air. Every step felt heavier than the last as they descended deeper into the bowels of the facility. The walls grew narrower, and the lights flickered, casting strange, elongated shadows. The air grew colder, the temperature plummeting as they moved deeper into the facility. The walls were lined with dark panels, strange alien symbols etched into their surfaces. Seraphina felt her skin crawl as she passed them, a sense of dread gnawing at her insides. The deeper they went, the less it felt like a mission, and the more it felt like a tomb. The elevator came to a screeching halt, and the doors slid open with a heavy mechanical groan. Before them stood a vast, cavernous room, filled with machines unlike anything Seraphina had ever seen. Their surfaces were sleek, organic-looking, almost alive, pulsing with an eerie, faint light. The floor was littered with vials and glass containers, most shattered, remnants of experiments, of humanity twisted and reshaped. "This is it," Seraphina whispered, her voice low with disbelief. Hawkins remained silent, his eyes scanning the room warily. "What were they doing here?" Hawkins asked, his voice thick with unease. Seraphina shook her head, eyes narrowing. "They weren't just breeding soldiers, they were creating something else." She moved toward the center of the room, where a large cylindrical tank stood. Inside, a human figure floated, suspended in clear liquid. The figure was unmistakably human, but something was off. Seraphina's heart stopped as she recognized the face, though it was disfigured, altered by years of experimentation. It was her. "Hawkins, this is a clone," Hawkins finished, his voice filled with awe and horror. "It's you." Seraphina took a step back, her knees almost buckling under the weight of the revelation. The clone's eyes were shut, its body devoid of any expression, as though waiting for a command. But what made her blood run cold was not the sight of herself, but the realization that this version of her had been made for one purpose only: war. She had been engineered, replicated, and brought to life with the singular goal of creating the ultimate weapon. "Why?" she whispered, her voice strained. "Why would they do this?" Hawkins didn't answer immediately, his gaze still locked on the figure inside the tank. "It's the ultimate form of control. They're not just breeding soldiers, they're breeding obedience. They're removing the human will and replacing it with compliance." Seraphina turned, her fists clenched at her sides. The air felt thick, suffocating. Every breath she took felt heavier than the last. "We can't let this continue." "But how?" Hawkins asked. It's beyond anything we've ever seen. How do we stop something that's already been set in motion?" "We destroy it," Seraphina replied, her voice hardening with resolve. "Everything. Every record, every experiment, every creation." She reached for the explosives in her pack, her fingers trembling as she loaded the device into place. Hawkins was still staring at the tank, his eyes filled with a mix of pity and fear. "This is the cost of truth, Hawkins," Seraphina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What we are, what they've turned us into, it's not just about survival anymore. It's about choosing who we want to be." Hawkins met her eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. This mission, this war, they had always been about fighting for Earth, but now it was personal. It was about reclaiming the essence of what made humanity worth saving. Seraphina activated the detonator, and the room filled with a violent, resonating hum. The tank shattered in an explosion of glass and liquid. The clone's body sank to the floor, lifeless and broken. For a moment, all Seraphina could hear was the ringing in her ears, the deafening silence that followed the chaos. But then, she heard a voice, soft, almost like a whisper. "I am not what you made me to be." Seraphina's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the voice. The clone, now lifeless, seemed to speak to her. She dropped to her knees beside it, her heart racing. Was it possible? Was there something in the clone's mind, something human that had broken through? Captain, we need to go, Hawkins urged, his voice tight with urgency. Now. Seraphina stood slowly, her mind a whirl of confusion. She had come to destroy the facility, to prevent the star from continuing their experiments. But now, she wasn't sure who the real enemy was. The clone had spoken, and for the first time, Seraphina wondered if perhaps the true weapon was not in the hands of the star, but in the very humanity they sought to control. Let's finish this, Seraphina said, her voice steady, even as her mind grappled with the growing doubt inside her. They turned to leave, knowing they had a mission to complete. But the truth, what humanity had become, what they were capable of, would stay with Seraphina, a ghost in her mind, haunting her every decision.